Melania's words to Jasmine caused a firestorm, and it changed everything. The lights hadn't even finished warming when the room shifted. Not a shout, not a camera flash, just a single presence stepping onto the soundstage, and every spine straightened. Every breath hitched, the kind of shift you feel in your bones before your brain catches up. Melania Trump had arrived, navy coat dress, cream heels that clicked like punctuation, eyes like polished glass. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. A subtle nod to the floor manager, a whispered, "Good afternoon," and then she sat. Regal, untouched, untouchable. She hadn't appeared on a political round table in years. Not since the last half-hearted attempt at bipartisan civility ended with a headline and a resignation. But here she was, back in the frame, back in the game. And 3 chairs down sat the storm. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Texas. Young, black, unapologetically direct. She didn't wait her turn to speak, she took it. And tonight she was the only reason half the country was watching. The producers knew. The viewers knew. Even the moderator, seasoned, silver-haired Steve Barkley, knew. This wasn't just another televised debate about political tone. This was a countdown. The backdrop was sleek glass desks, backlit panels, no live audience, just the cold presence of millions watching from home. 4 panelists, 1 moderator, 2 women, and a microphone that would soon betray them all. From the jump, the tension wasn't loud. It was precise, like a coiled wire. The questions were softballs at first. What does political civility mean to you? Melania smiled, tilted her head. We should speak with purpose, not noise. She said, her accent soft but undeniable. Real strength is not loud. The camera cut to Jasmine. She arched an eyebrow. Sometimes she said slowly, noise is the only thing people hear after being ignored too long. Laughter flickered through the studio, not thunderous, but real. It broke the tension just enough to make space for more. And more was coming. For 20 minutes they danced. Melania with her icy restraint. Jasmine with her coiled steel. They didn't raise voices. They didn't interrupt. But every reply landed like a slap in velvet gloves, until the commercial break. Steve Barkley smiled into the lens. We'll be right back after this. Stay with us. The cameras pulled back. Broadcast feed faded to black. Stage lights dimmed to signal off air. Producers stepped in with bottled water. Someone fixed an earpiece. A brief shuffle, the fake calm of downtime. But something buzzed underneath it all, like static waiting to jump. Melania didn't look at Jasmine. She sat with perfect posture, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her head tilted just slightly. The lean was calculated, not casual. You should be careful who you call out, she said. Low, quiet, not a threat, not technically. Some of us never forget. Jasmine froze, not with fear, but with calculation. Her eyes didn't narrow. She didn't flinch. Just blinked once slow. A pause, then turned her head with deliberate stillness. Oh, she said. Voice light. Expression blank. That's supposed to scare me. Melania gave a smile, not kind, not cruel, just hollow. But none of them noticed the light. On the audio control panel backstage, a small LED had stayed yellow. Not red, not off. Yellow a glitch. It meant the microphones were still live. And in a second, that wasn't supposed to matter. America heard the whole thing. It wasn't broadcast. It wasn't polished. It was raw, caught on a backup feed being monitored by an overnight editor who wasn't even supposed to be listening. Angela Russo was 29. Night shift. Low pay. High caffeine. She had been cutting highlight reels in a back corner when she heard it. You should be careful who you call out. Some of us never forget. She froze. Then she rewound. Played it again. Clear, clean, undeniable. Angela didn't move for nearly a minute. The silence roared. Her hand hovered over the clip tool. Was it worth it? Was it real? Then she clicked. 20 seconds of audio. Captured, subtitled, saved. She sent it to a friend. That friend had a blue check. And within 40 minutes, the world was on fire. Hot Melania was the first to trend. Then came Sturridge Crockett TV's Trump. Then simply Chardin she side at newsrooms scrambled. Twitter exploded. Instagram meme pages posted side by sides of Jasmine's still face and Melania's leaning posture, frozen like a Renaissance painting laced with venom. Some called it a threat. Others called it a warning. But everyone heard it. And that was the thing about a mic that stays on. It doesn't whisper. It remembers. It remembers. And so did she. The clip looped across timelines like a metronome of modern fury. TikToks, with dark piano music, cable news hosts, squinting into freeze frames, Reddit threads, dissecting syllables. But, in the eye of the storm, Jasmine Crockett sat still. She wasn't in a green room, not behind a podium, just her couch, dim lamplight, and a glass of untouched tea. The audio buzzed from her phone again, one more replay, sent by someone from her team. She didn't hit play. She didn't need to. She remembered every word. You should be careful who you call out. Some of us never forget. It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. The timing. The tilt of Melania's head. Like finishing a sentence she'd started long ago. Jasmine knew this wasn't new. This was inherited. A whisper passed down through decades of gatekeeping smiles. And suddenly, it wasn't just about this moment. It was about that moment. Florida? Naples? A fundraiser? Back then, Jasmine was months into her first term. She hadn't even unpacked her DC apartment. She was in that permanent new Congress fog, sharp in public, exhausted in private. She only agreed to go because her chief of staff, Dion, had said the room would be full of donors. And power. Just talk about your clinic bill, Dion had told her. Get a handshake. Make them see you. She wore a teal blazer. Memorized her talking points. Carried them folded in her clutch like a secret weapon. But she hadn't expected Melania to be there. The former First Lady arrived late. No press team, no entourage, just 2 aides and that ever-frozen gaze. The room quieted, not in admiration and calculation. Jasmine noticed that too. They didn't speak during appetizers, or mains. But during dessert, they found themselves side by side at the bar, waiting on a slow-handed bartender to make something citrusy and irrelevant. Jasmine had turned and said, "Ma'am." Melania had given the smallest nod. "Congresswoman?" Then came the moment. "You know," Jasmine had said, "my district has one of the highest uninsured rates in the country. I'm hoping to convince a few people here to support community clinic expansions." Melania's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That is your work." "Yes," she said. "Yes," Jasmine replied. "Real problems? Real communities?" Another pause. Then Melania, some people shout. Others smile. It does not make one more sincere. Jasmine caught the meaning. It wasn't subtle, and Melania hadn't waited for a reply. But Jasmine had filed it away. In the same drawer, women like her keep every backhanded compliment, every quiet warning disguised as guidance. She remembered the tone, the phrasing, the way Melania looked not at her, but through her. And so, when months later Jasmine saw Melania's name listed as a panelist for the Albany broadcast, something in her shifted. Not fear, not anticipation, readiness. She told Dion, if she tries that tone again, I'm not letting it slide. Now here she was. A mic hot by mistake or by fate. And the same tone delivered like a prophecy, finally cashed in. Back in the present, Jasmine's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a replay. It was a name she hadn't seen in years. Ruthie Miles, old friend, former intern, now working at some sharp-elbowed DC consultancy. Jasmine picked up. Girl, Ruthie's voice hit fast. "No small talk, you need to be careful." Jasmine exhaled. "Nice to hear from you too." I'm serious? They're already spinning it, saying you baited her, saying you planned it. I didn't even say anything, Jasmine said, tired smile in her voice. That's the point, Ruthie replied. You didn't have to. You're a target now. Personally. These folks play long. There was silence on the line. Then Jasmine asked, You think she meant it as a threat? Another pause. I think she said exactly what she wanted to say, Ruthie said, and I think you scared her without even trying. The call ended not long after, but the words lingered. You scared her. That night, Jasmine didn't sleep. Dion crashed on the floor of the office fielding messages from every direction. Supporters, journalists, donors, trolls. One message stuck out, a handwritten note scanned and emailed from a high school teacher in Fort Worth. I've been silenced like that. Like I didn't belong in the room. Thank you for showing us you don't have to whisper. Jasmine read it twice. Because it wasn't just about Melania. It was about every room that tries to shrink you. Every hallway built too narrow for voices like hers. And suddenly, the story wasn't about what was said. It was about who was expected not to respond. And suddenly, the story wasn't about what was said. It was about who was expected not to respond. But Jasmine Crockett had never been the type to follow that script. The morning after the clip detonated across the internet, Capitol Hill felt different. Like the air had thickened. Not with noise, but with surveillance. Every glance from a colleague lingered half a second too long. Staffers whispered in corners. Journalists loitered near stairwells. Everyone wanted to see how she'd play it. Would she escalate? Would she shrink? Jasmine did neither. She walked into the Capitol in a burgundy suit and a stare sharp enough to crack granite. No press statement, no counter comment, just presence. And that in itself became a kind of war cry. Behind her, Dion trailed silently, phone in one hand, a latte in the other, sleep-deprived but wired. You're trending again, she muttered. How high, number 2? What's number 1, that NFL scandal? But give it a few hours. Jasmine smiled dry, amused, unbothered. Guess I should thank her. But gratitude was the last thing in her bloodstream. She remembered something her English teacher once told her when she was 15. You might want to dial it back. People aren't used to that kind of energy from someone like you. She hadn't said black girl, but she didn't have to. Jasmine had carried that memory like a hidden bruise ever since. Now that voice echoed again. Not from a teacher, but from a former first lady. Softer, slicker, but the meaning unchanged. Be careful. You're not supposed to be this loud. Later that day, a reporter cornered Jasmine just outside a committee hearing. Congresswoman, do you believe the First Lady owes you an apology? She didn't pause, didn't flinch. I think the First Lady knows exactly what she said, and she walked on. Meanwhile, Melania's camp remained silent. Not even a half-hearted clarification. Not even a denial. The silence was strategic, or cowardly, or both. In the absence of official comment, others stepped into the void. Conservative commentators claimed Melania had simply been offering personal advice. Some praised her composure. Others mocked Jasmine for overreacting. One headline read, Crockett weaponizes a whisper. But Jasmine didn't strike back, not with noise. She wrote a handwritten letter to her constituents. Scanned, posted. I was elected to speak truth, not to whisper behind cameras. I will not change that because of power or position. If that's loud, then so be it. 10 lines, no names, no hashtags. But it hit like a gavel. Within hours, the post had over 1 million impressions. Shared by celebrities. Quoted by school teachers. Retweeted by working moms and college kids alike. It wasn't just a defense. It was a statement of presence. A reminder that silence may feel safe, but it never saves you. The internet called it iconic. Melania's team said nothing, but others noticed. Quietly, carefully, a leak surfaced, an internal email from Melania's advance team weeks prior to the panel. If avoidable, do not seat Mrs. Trump next to Rep. Crockett. It hadn't been enforced, but it didn't need to be. It said what they couldn't say out loud, that this confrontation, this collision, had been forecast, even feared. And somewhere in the upper offices of WMYT, a junior producer named Riley Sharp started pulling logs, reviewing seating charts, reading transcripts, and asking himself, what else have we missed? Meanwhile, Angela Russo, the assistant editor who first leaked the clip, sat in silence. Her name wasn't public. Her folder had been wiped. But she was watching the storm she started, and she didn't regret a second of it. One night, she received a text from an unknown number. Respect what you did. Don't talk to press. Don't trust the silence. She never found out who sent it, but she saved it. By the third day, the phrase hot mic moment had gone from a scandal to a slogan. Activist groups printed it on t-shirts. Protesters held signs outside the Capitol that read, "We heard you," and Jasmine. She went quiet, but not to retreat. She was preparing. In a closed-door meeting with her team, she stood at a whiteboard while Dion scrolled furiously through live coverage on her tablet. "We don't need to drag this out," Jasmine said, "but we're not going to ignore it either." Dion looked up. "So, what are you thinking?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. An op-ed. Something real. Not fire, just clarity. By noon the next day, the Charlotte Standard published a piece titled, "Words in the Dark Still Have Power." Jasmine didn't name Melania. She didn't reference the panel or the whisper directly. She didn't have to. I've learned that what's whispered in comfort often echoes louder than what's shouted in anger. The question is not whether someone meant harm, but why they felt they could say it to begin with. It hit like thunder in a museum. Commentators couldn't stop quoting it. Classrooms assigned it. Podcasters dissected it. Editors wept over it. It wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reframing. And it worked. Suddenly, the story wasn't, did she mean it? It was, why did she think she could say it at all? And in that quiet shift, Jasmine Crockett did something no political mic drop could. She turned a whisper into a movement. And in that quiet shift, Jasmine Crockett did something no political mic drop could. She reframed the battlefield. No longer just Melania versus Jasmine. No longer a scandal boxed inside news cycles or late-night sound bites. This had become something else entirely, an interrogation of power itself, of how it's wielded. Who is allowed to wield it quietly, and who is punished for speaking out loud. The op-ed landed with the precision of a scalpel and the force of a sledgehammer. And while the media scrambled to pivot, civility, in crisis, the politics of silence. The whisper heard round the hill. Jasmine didn't flinch. She kept moving. Her team kept working. And in the backdrop, the silence from Melania's side grew heavier. Not just quiet, but loaded. Like a weapon being cocked behind velvet. Inside the White House, emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. Comms advisors debated strategy. Should she clarify? Should she deny? Should we reframe it as sisterly advice? Ultimately, they chose the same option that had carried them this far, nothing. But this time, nothing said everything, and people noticed. They began asking not what Melania had whispered, but why she had chosen to whisper it at all. Why not say it on air? Why not own it? Because maybe it wasn't a comment meant for public consumption. Maybe it was a reminder, a pressure point pressed in secret. If so, it had missed its mark. Instead of shrinking, Jasmine had ignited, and the ripple effects hadn't stopped. In Houston, a high school civics teacher began her class with Jasmine's quote printed in bold on the whiteboard. In Sacramento, a grandmother clipped the op-ed from a printout and taped it to her fridge. On Twitter, a college sophomore wrote she didn't raise her voice. She just refused to lower it for comfort. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because something else was in motion. Another invitation. This time not televised. Not public. A dinner. Discreet. Elite. The Harrington Foundation, a bipartisan organization known for its no press, no photos. Political Retreats had extended a personal request to Jasmine Crockett. It wasn't a coincidence. The dinner would be held in Dallas at the Arboretum Grand Hall. 50 guests, assigned tables, pre-written talking points, no cameras, and Melania Trump would be in attendance. It was the kind of room where influence hums beneath crystal chandeliers, where senators, CEOs, former ambassadors sip wine and call it policy, where the real deals are done and where the women who speak too loudly are never invited twice. But this time, Jasmine was invited, and she wasn't bringing staff. I want to walk into this room on my own, she told Dion. No one should think I need help to earn my seat. Dion didn't argue. She just looked up from her laptop and nodded, eyes heavy but proud. Jasmine arrived early. Dark green dress, low heels, no entourage. She moved like she'd been there 100 times, like she didn't need to earn the space, she was the space. Melania entered 20 minutes later. Champagne blouse, satin skirt, 2 aides, no visible Secret Service. Their eyes met once. Not long enough to say anything, just enough to remember everything. Dinner passed in curated conversation. Polite nods. Laughter practiced and precise. The keynote speaker, a former ambassador, delivered a speech on unity that had been workshopped into harmlessness. And then came the moment. Dessert had just been served. Jasmine stood quietly excusing herself toward the hallway, near the restrooms. Crystal clinked. Chairs shifted. The kind of intermission only those watching closely could understand. Melania followed. They met alone in a corridor lined with framed photographs of previous dinners, men in tuxedos, women in pearls. Legacy walls. This time, Melania spoke first. You wrote very beautifully. Her voice was calm, no edge, no smoke. Just air. Jasmine turned. Thank you. A pause. Melania looked directly at her. You believe I threatened you? I believe, Jasmine replied. You said what you meant. Melania nodded once. I meant to say, be cautious. This is a dangerous space, and words have power. Jasmine stepped closer. Just slightly. And yet she said your words came when the cameras were off. That's the part that matters. You don't know what it's like, Melania replied. Her voice softened, not weak, but vulnerable in a way Jasmine hadn't heard before. To have every move watched, judged, twisted. I do, Jasmine said. But the difference is I've never had the privilege of silence being mistaken for grace. The hallway was quiet. Just them. No lens, no moderator, no trending tag. I didn't mean to hurt you, Melania said, but I'm not sorry for saying it. Jasmine tilted her head. Then you meant it. A beat? Then Melania said something Jasmine didn't expect. I admire you. Jasmine blinked. That's not the word I thought you'd use. I admire what I can't do, Melania continued. You speak without fear. I was taught to survive by choosing silence. The tension thinned, not warmth, but understanding. Mutual reluctant respect. I'm not fearless, Jasmine said. I just learned that silence doesn't protect people like me. Melania nodded, slowly, as if hearing it for the first time. They didn't hug, didn't shake hands, just held that moment between them, unshared, unspun. Then Melania turned and walked back toward the ballroom. Jasmine followed a minute later. Nothing seemed different, but something had shifted. And though no statements were issued, no press briefings held, the absence of performance was louder than any monologue. By the time the story leaked, because it always does, there was no footage. Just rumor, just whispers. Which, in this case, was fitting. because both women had just rewritten the terms of the Whisper War. And in this new chapter of Unspoken Detente, they rewrote the Whisper War with silence. But silence, especially mutual strategic silence, is rarely sustainable in American politics, especially not when the nation has its ear pressed to every wall, breath held, waiting for another line, another slip, another unscripted moment. Because silence in a place built on performance doesn't stay empty, it echoes. And Washington, as always, listened louder in the quiet. By the end of that week, reporters didn't just ask what Melania and Jasmine had said behind those polished doors in Dallas. They asked what it meant that neither of them had leaked it. Not a quote, not a nod, nothing. For the first time since the hot mic exploded, the speculation turned philosophical. What does this say about modern power? Is civility really silence? Who gets to decide which words are threats and which are advice? Political panels filled the vacuum with body language experts, former White House advisors, and linguists, decoding Melania's original whisper as if it were foreign policy in iambic pentameter. Meanwhile, think pieces flooded the whisper that launched a reckoning. The sound of power shifting. What happens when the mic never turns off? But the most potent conversations didn't happen on CNN or MSNBC. They happened in classrooms, in hair salons, in church basements, and corner store checkout lines. Among people who didn't care about hashtags, but felt the sting of what it means to be spoken to, like you don't belong. And for them, Jasmine Crockett had become a vessel for something long simmering. Not just resistance, recognition. I didn't know how to name it, one woman wrote in a Facebook post that racked up over 100,000 shares. But when Jasmine said, "Silence doesn't protect people like me," I felt like she was saying it for me too. That line, the one whispered in Dallas, out of sight, but not out of mind, took on a life of its own. It was quoted in high school debates, painted onto murals in Atlanta, included in sermon notes in Chicago. And in the middle of it all, Jasmine didn't shout. She stayed present, poised, sharp. She gave no interviews, declined every request to clarify her feelings. When a late-night host offered to have her on for a civility showdown, her office replied simply, "The Congresswoman is focused on her district." Because here's the thing about power. Real power doesn't chase the camera. It lets the camera chase it. But that didn't mean Jasmine wasn't strategizing. She was. In a quiet office off the hill, surrounded by notepads, research briefs, and half-eaten salad containers, Jasmine sat with Dion and her lead policy advisor. "The window is open," Dion said, scrolling through polling data. "People are listening to you now who weren't 2 weeks ago. Young voters, women, independents. We can use that," her advisor added. "Push the clinic bill again. Build a real platform around it. Frame it as not just healthcare, but presence, access, belonging." Jasmine nodded. "We do it on our terms. No stunts, no fireballs. Just keep speaking truth and speaking it on the record." Meanwhile, over in the East Wing, the temperature was rising. Melania Trump had remained publicly quiet, but her aides weren't so composed. Some wanted to go on offense. "She's making a moment out of nothing," one staffer said in an internal memo. "We need to recenter the narrative. Civility isn't cowardice." Others urged restraint. "The moment has passed. Don't pour gasoline on a whisper." But Melania, for all her aloof poise, had always known when to let time do the work. And for now, time was smoothing the edges of controversy. Her supporters called her graceful. Her critics called her calculating. But one thing they all agreed on, she hadn't lost her composure. That became the new currency. Composure as strength. And yet, even as the public conversation cooled internally, the reckoning had just begun. In the editing rooms of WNYT logs were reviewed. Angela Russo's name stayed buried in a folder that one senior executive opened and then quietly closed. He didn't report it. didn't delete it either, because deep down, even he knew the leak wasn't a betrayal, it was an intervention. And the real question wasn't who leaked it, it was why that whisper mattered so much. Because let's be honest, Melania didn't curse, didn't shout, she didn't even accuse. But she said it in a way that told a whole story. And Jasmine's refusal to fold under it, the way she flipped the narrative with 10 words, with an op-ed, with a stare across a candlelit ballroom, turned that moment from a scandal into a reckoning. Not just for her, for everyone watching. Because what's more dangerous than an insult, a coded warning delivered by someone who knows exactly what rooms you're not supposed to be in? And what's more powerful than a rebuttal refusing to shrink? Not in tone, not in posture, not in purpose. That's what Jasmine did. And whether Melania intended to or not, she revealed something essential. That the battle over who belongs, who gets to speak without being warned, isn't over. It's evolving. And if this was just a whisper war, then Jasmine Crockett had become the woman who didn't fight it with volume, but with vision. And Jasmine's vision was what endured. Because in a town that thrives on sound bites and stunts, she rewrote the playbook. Not with louder words, but with longer echoes. She didn't shout over her opponent, she outlasted her. And in doing so, she revealed the truth about power. The strongest voice in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one that makes people rethink the rules of the room itself. The hot mic moment had long since moved past viral, past outrage, past even meme status. Now it was lore. Political TikTok dubbed it the Whisper Revolution. Professors taught it in political communication courses. Think tanks hosted roundtables. And across America, people still invoked the phrase whenever someone tried to diminish them behind polite tones. Careful who you call out. But Jasmine had flipped that. She had made it mean something else. Careful because you're watching me rise. Careful because I heard you, and I didn't flinch. Careful because I'm not shrinking anymore. And now, months later, as a new election cycle loomed, whispers weren't the weapon anymore. Voice was. Jasmine stood at the front of a packed auditorium. In Dallas, this time invited as a keynote speaker, not a panelist or side guest. Hundreds of women, organizers, educators, young candidates, voters listened as she began. They told me my tone was the problem. They said power prefers silence. I say silence prefers power. And I've seen what happens when we refuse to whisper. The room erupted not in noise, but in stillness that buzzed with recognition. This wasn't applause, it was alignment. Across the country, more than 300 Democratic candidates had quoted her op-ed in stump speeches. 8 advocacy groups had used her words in fundraising ads. And a new PAC mic'd up launched to support candidates, particularly women of color, running on platforms of political transparency and community equity. Jasmine hadn't planned this wave, but she was riding it with clarity and purpose. Meanwhile, in the corridors of power, some were still trying to understand how this all happened. A single sentence whispered off air, a moment never meant to be heard. A quiet sentence that became a national litmus test for how we judge intense civility and confrontation. Some staffers inside the GOP still dismissed it as a PR stunt. She played the victim, ran with it. Classic identity politics, one senior advisor muttered to Politico, but others weren't so sure. In private donor dinners and off-record think tank panels, Republican strategists debated how Melania's moment had slipped from strength into scrutiny. Because, make no mistake, Melania's silence had once been her shield, her elegance, her mystery, her refusal to play the game in public. It had worked, until it didn't. Until one whisper made everyone wonder what else she was saying when the cameras were off. And maybe worse, what else she thought without ever saying aloud. She hadn't lost support. Her base remained intact. Her press team never folded. But something had shifted. The quiet was no longer read as dignity. It was being reinterpreted as deflection. In the final months of that year, a journalist from the Portland Tribune dropped another leak, an internal memo from Melania's East Wing communications team. The Congresswoman's op-ed has become a symbol for anti-establishment sentiment. Continue to monitor Crockett's mentions and prepare counter-narratives should she enter broader electoral fields. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was an admission of concern. Because Jasmine was no longer just a congresswoman from Texas. She was a symbol, a voice too precise to dismiss, a threat too articulate to caricature. And perhaps most dangerously, she was listening when others assumed she was just waiting. The final proof came when an anonymous blog post surfaced on Medium under the pseudonym Aria South. Readers quickly deduced it was Angela Russo, the assistant editor who leaked the whisper months before. In it, she wrote, "I didn't release that clip to burn anyone. I did it because I was tired of watching power speak in coded tones while the rest of us were told to play nice. I released it because someone needed to hear what wasn't supposed to be heard, and I wanted Jasmine to know someone was listening. No follow-up, no interviews, just that. And it was enough. Because when you build a movement out of a moment that wasn't supposed to exist, every small truth becomes sacred." The clip still resurfaces, not a scandal, but as scripture, a reminder that politics isn't just what happens in chambers and hearings. It's what happens when no one thinks the mic is live. It's what happens when someone says something to remind you that you're not supposed to belong, and you stay anyway. When a whisper becomes a movement, the message is simple. We're done shrinking in workplaces, on school boards, at family dinners, on debate stages. We're done letting power wear politeness like a disguise. Jasmine's voice didn't end with the whisper. It expanded it. She returned to the House floor weeks later and delivered a speech that made no reference to the past. No names, no audio. But it ended with a line that hit harder than any confrontation ever could. "My voice may bother some, but I wasn't elected to whisper." And the chamber fell still. Not in discomfort, in awakening. Because once you hear the whisper, you can't unhear it. And once someone like Jasmine speaks into it, you can't go back to silence. Not now. Not ever again.